They want trade, not aid, so say many of the American farmers hardest hit by the U.S. tariffs on China. As trade talks have stalled and tensions escalate, U.S. media is reporting rising rates of bankruptcy, foreclosure and even suicide among those farmers. In response, the U.S. government seemed to hope that that kind words and extra cash will soften the blow. In announcing a $16 billion aid package for American farmers last Thursday, President Trump proclaimed them patriots. Meanwhile, the American footwear industry is also hurting as it warned President Trump of the catastrophic impact of increased tariffs on our consumers, our companies, and the American economy as a whole. End of quote. So is it truly only China that's paying the bill for this trade war, as President Trump claims? And how much worse will it get for American companies and consumers if the situation were to continue as such? Joining me for the discussion is via Skype Wanda Patchett, a soybean and corn and pig farmer from Minnesota. Farm Living, from Minnesota, the U.S., and from Washington, Matt Priest, President and CEO of Footwear Distributors and Retailers of America, and here in the Beijing studio, Professor Liu Baocheng of the University of International Business and Economics. The warmest welcome to all of you to The Point. Wanda, let me go to you first. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, the latest aid package last Thursday is the second major bailout the Trump administration has handed out in response to the tariff-related decreases in agricultural trade with China. Last November, President Trump announced $12 billion. But soybean farmers called the plan a pacifier or a band-aid, and it sounds like a lot of money, but exactly how much did you receive personally? Was it enough to break even from the losses that you incurred?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me first. So last fall, we did receive a payment of just a little bit over $30,000 for our farm. That was basically between soybeans, corn, and hogs. We really appreciate the aid that we did receive. But, just like you had mentioned earlier, the bottom line is we really need trade. So it helps a bit, but we need a better solution, more long-term solution, and we need to really work through some of these trade disagreements and remove those tariffs and move forward. So I would say about a little over $30,000 is what we received last fall, and that equals to maybe about 3% of our total revenue on our farm from last year.
So would you elaborate a little bit more, help me understand this $30,000 US? How helpful is it? Is it enough to cover the losses? I don't know to what degree you have suffered. Is the $30,000 US going to be enough to cover the gap? And how much more potential loss are you looking at? Do you think this new package of aid will make that up?
Sure. So I would say that the $30,000 definitely helps as far as some of our expenses, help cover those expenses. We've made changes on our farm from the last year or two, between the low commodity prices. So what that means for my farm is that we don't do any upgrades. We're just kind of getting by, having to dig into some of our working capital. And the same thing happens this year. So we definitely have enough to cover our direct expenses, but there's nothing there for anything extra that we may need to do for our farming business. You can only go about so long on kind of riding those coattails a little bit, and at some point you're going to need to, if you've got a piece of machinery that's breaking down, need to basically replace that or upgrade it so that it continues to work. So those are the type of things we're not able to do on the farm, but we are covering our basic expenses.
How much longer are you able to hold on to the current situation without selling, selling as you were doing before the trade war started?
Sure. So, we are generally patient people on the farm. You have to be, because it's a roller coaster out here. I mean, not only are we dealing with, commodity prices, trade issues, but we're dealing with weather issues, amongst other things. But I will tell you, it's getting harder as time goes on here to keep that patience. And so I just want I know that President Trump and President Xi are going to speak to each other at the G20 next month. I'm hoping that we'll restart the negotiations again. We just need to move forward, and we just need trade. I can't say it any more clear than that.
Okay. We were hearing about reports about rising farmer bankruptcy, foreclosure, even suicides. Are you hearing any of this? Is there any example of such in the people that you know?
Yeah. So I know that we've got some people definitely going out of business. They're going to be, unfortunately, the smaller ones. I'm not, as far as like suicides where I'm located, and with the news that I'm receiving, I'm not hearing much of that. I do think the bankers are pretty patient, trying to find solutions to help farmers kind of work through this. But definitely, I know that there are some smaller producers that maybe are working now with larger producers that can kind of help them out, maybe take over some land, take over some of the hog operations, kind of help them exit the industry, unfortunately. But not massive yet. But who knows as time goes on.
All right, thank you. Let me leave it here for now, and I hope I have time to get back to you, but it doesn't look like we'll have that much time. Let me go to Mr. Priest there. How about your community? I mean, you a letter publicized by your society to President Trump just a couple of days ago. The company said the increased tariffs could have a, quote, catastrophic impact for our consumers, our companies, and the American as a whole. What do you mean by catastrophic?
Yeah, we are very concerned about the implementation of additional duties on footwear imports because we already pay very high duty rates. We paid $3 billion in duties last year, and we are the poster child for showing how duties, tariffs impact the cost of goods for American consumers. So as prices rise, whether it's based on energy, labor, additional tariffs, those price impacts hit the American consumer directly and almost immediately. And so we wanted to alert the president that as he continues these talks and these actions as it relates to our relationship with China, that he understands that we actually do pay high duty rates and continue to do so and have done so for over 90 years.
What kind of specific difficulties are your membership expressing to you? For instance, are they talking about higher, I do not know, that the shoes don't sell, or that they don't have too much cash? I do not know any specific examples of difficulties, or are these just expectations of difficulties to come, and that they have to raise price in order to make ends meet?
Yeah, I think the biggest difficulty is uncertainty. Business likes certainty, whether good, bad, or otherwise, so that they can plan for such certainty. And right now, it's very uncertain. You have costs that were negotiated on product 6, 8, 9 months ago that could have an additional 25% added to it in the next month or two. And so not knowing with any certainty what's going to happen with the discussions between President Xi and President Trump in Japan next month, and trying to figure out the best way to navigate through that process. The other thing that is kind of driving concern and uncertainty is the movement of sourcing for footwear. 10 years ago, 93% of footwear in the U.S. imported into the U.S. came from China. And since that time, China has moved away from footwear production in the main coastal provinces of Guangdong province and Fujian province, and footwear production has moved to places like Vietnam. And so today's number is 69% of our volume. But that's still a ton of footwear, our #1 supplier. And so when you threaten additional costs on that sourcing, and you don't give a lot of lead time to move that production, which is very difficult to do for footwear, you're going to create a lot of uncertainty within our supply chain.
You said your membership had to pay $3 billion more last year. How does that translate to the prices of an ordinary or an average pair of, let's say, sneakers?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the way footwear retail, and pretty much all retail math works, is that as a product crosses the border, there's a 3 or 4 times markup as it exchanges hands from the factory to the importer to the distributor to the retailer and then ultimately to the consumer. And so a $3 billion tariff on a good overall can equal upwards of $8–9 billion in additional costs on footwear consumers specifically. And we've estimated this action alone that the president's proposing will see an additional $7 billion to footwear consumers. And so when we have a great economy right now, a very strong economy, wages are up, unemployment is down, it seems like an unforced error. It seems like an error on our part to try to stop the growth of our economy and take some of that discretionary income away from consumers in the form of inflation and higher prices. And so that's why we had the letter sent in, and that's why our members are kind of sounding the alarm as it relates to these discussions.
Are you optimistic that maybe, you know, your voices will be heard?
I am optimistic in the sense that the latest proposal, List 4, as we call it here in the U.S., encapsulates every single product that China sends us, and it's mainly consumer goods. And so we've moved from List 1 and 2, which were focused on more industrialized policy, non-consumer goods, into the consumer goods space. And so there's a plethora of different industries and organizations and consumer groups that are going to be impacted by this latest proposal. My hope is, as we saw in Buenos Aires in December, that President Xi and President Trump will meet and there'll be some kind of discussion and maybe a pause in the action, or heck, the announcement of a full-fledged agreement, which would be fantastic, and that this uncertainty, at least for the time being, can be taken away. But in the meantime, we have to plan for the worst. We have to plan for 25% additional tariffs this summer, and we have to plan very quickly, and that's what our members are currently in the process of doing.
Finally, could you just move the shoes out of China and to other places, or move it back to the United States?
Yeah, unfortunately, footwear production is very labor intensive. It takes a lot of capital, a lot of investment, and a lot of capacity to build that capacity and to maintain it, and it takes years to do that. And so we're still moving to places like Vietnam, but that's taken quite some time. And what China does really well is it produces product for the mass retail marketplace. It does it very efficiently and effectively.
Let me just interrupt here. Is it possible that any of these production go back to the United States? You said you're moving it to Vietnam.
No, it's not possible. We don't have the capacity. Labor rates are far too high to meet the needs of 320 million consumers. And so the best that we can hope for or expect is that we would move to some other Asian country that can continue to supply the U.S. marketplace.
All right, all right. Let me get to our guest here in the studio, Professor Liu Baocheng. Professor Liu, what is your impression, having heard what has been happening to, for instance, Wanda in Minnesota and to all the shoe manufacturers or manufacturers, let's say?
I think there's quite a level of anxiety among those retailers, particularly smaller businesses, farmers, etc. Yes, farmers are really being taken care of by the $12 billion aid, and now there's additional amount that's $16 billion US aid, but that's not really the way of doing business. So it's really is the U.S. government is going to buy so many soybeans and cotton, etc. So, and from the retailer's point of view, Trump always says, oh, it's China's going to pay, or building a wall, Mexicans are going to pay. But it is really the importers, in the end, the consumers will pay for it, because it's very obvious. No one is ready to sell at a loss from export point of view. So the unpredictability or uncertainty created, it is really scary, not only to American businesses and farmers, but also to the whole world, because they are very much intertwined in a supply chain around the world, and that's something a responsible government would really have to look very carefully into it. It's not really the ego or political agenda, but it's really the interest of the people.
Yeah, let me go back to Wanda in Minnesota. Now, one of the questions that many people are very puzzled about is that although President Trump's actions, the tariffs, have indirectly or even directly hurt farmers' interests for the short term, again, many farmers still support his policies. He still enjoys a lot of support among them. How do you look at that? Do you share that kind of attitude?
Yeah. Yeah, so, I will tell you, I believe that the patience is wearing out. I think farmers are willing to do what they can with the hope that there will be a better deal at the end as far as trade agreements, that sort of thing. But I can tell you that the patience is wearing thin, and we just need to get these trade agreements on the table. We need to get them resolved. We need to get rid of the tariffs. I know right now with the hog industry, we've got another 50% tariff on our hogs coming into China, which puts us at 62%, which is really way too high. So we really like that 50% back off and other agreements. But
okay.
yes.
All right. Finally, Professor Liu, is it all of this necessary? I mean, could there have been any other way to solve the problems without resorting to all of these punitive tariffs back and forth?
Well, listen to people.
Absolutely,
because, yes.
Yeah,
because, government are elected by people and they are supported by taxpayers, and listen to them. And so look like Wanda, how would she really expect? And, the business retailers, so, and also every consumers. So this type of, double face or double standard can only, in the end, hurt the political constituency and hurt their reputation and credibility.
All right, we're going to keep a very close watch on the situation. Many thanks to my three guests: Wanda Pache, a farmer from Minnesota Farm Living; Matt Priest, President and CEO of Footwear Distributors and Retailers of America; and Professor Liu Baocheng from the University of International Business and Economics.